I took my neighbor to the hospital when his brother OD'd. 3 days later, I found my door locks changed and my name removed from the mailbox. "You don't belong here anymore," he said, holding my keys. I stayed silent, collected every message, and when the police came knocking, he wasn't ready for. I've lived in the same apartment in Wilmington, North Carolina for over 6 years. It's a small building, only 12 units total, 2 per floor. Nothing fancy. Just red bricks, loud plumbing, and a view of the parking lot. But it was home. The guy across the hall, Jace, moved in last year. Maybe 32 or 33. Always wore long sleeves, even in the summer. Didn't say much. At first I figured he was just quiet, maybe worked nights or something. But I started noticing things, different people showing up at odd hours, loud talking in the hallway, weird smells. I wasn't going to say anything. It wasn't my business. We weren't friends, but we'd nod if we passed each other. I never went into his apartment, and he never came into mine. Then one Sunday night around 11:30, there was banging on my door. Not just knocking, frantic banging. I opened it, and Jace was standing there, panicked. "It's my brother," he said. "He's not breathing." I followed him out into the hallway and saw a guy on the floor, early 20s, completely out of it, gasping like a fish out of water. I knew what I was looking at. I'd seen it before. Overdose. Jace kept saying we couldn't call 911. Said he'd already gotten in trouble before. Said he couldn't risk it. I didn't want to argue while someone was dying, so I grabbed my keys and told him to help me carry the guy to my car. I drove us to the ER, running every red light I could. Jace sat in the back seat with his brother, slapping his face, trying to keep him awake. At the hospital, they rushed his brother in. It was fentanyl, they told us. Strong batch. Another few minutes, and he wouldn't have made it. Jace and I sat in silence in the waiting room. For hours. He barely looked up. Around 2:30 in the morning, he finally turned to me and said, "I owe you." I told him not to worry about it. I wasn't looking for anything. I just didn't want to watch someone die in a hallway. We drove back in silence. He thanked me again before going into his apartment. 3 days later, I came home from work and my key didn't work. I thought maybe the lock was jammed. Tried it a few times. Then I noticed something. The doorknob looked newer, shinier. I walked downstairs to the mailbox. My name was gone. Just a piece of paper with Jace, last name, written in all caps, was taped where my label used to be. I ran back up and started knocking on the door. Jace opened it. He was holding my keys. "You don't live here anymore," he said. I thought he was joking. "What the hell are you talking about?" "I changed the lease," he said. "You're out." I asked him how that was even possible, but he just smiled. "You can go stay with your hospital friends," he said, and shut the door in my face. I just stood there. No yelling, no threats. I left. I stayed with a friend that night. The next morning, I called the landlord. That's when I found out what really happened. The landlord sounded confused when I called. I told him who I was, gave my apartment number, and said I needed to talk about my lease. He paused for a second. "I thought you already moved out," he said. "No," I said. "I didn't. Someone changed the locks on me." He went quiet again. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Jace came by last week with a woman. Said you were moving out early and transferring the lease to him. Had the paperwork. Had your signature." "My signature?" "Yeah," he said. "Looked legit." "You don't remember signing?" I told him I never signed anything. "Then someone forged it," he said slowly. I asked to come down and see the papers. He agreed. When I got there, he pulled out a manila folder and handed me the lease transfer form. My name was scribbled in shaky handwriting at the bottom. It wasn't mine. Not even close. He looked pissed. "This is fraud," he muttered. "He signed this last Tuesday." That was the night after the hospital. I asked if I could get back into my apartment. He said he'd have to call legal. He wasn't sure what to do. Said it would take time. Meanwhile, Jace was living in my place, sleeping in my bed, probably going through my stuff. I asked if he'd moved anything out. The landlord shrugged. "I haven't been up there since he gave me the form," he said. I didn't wait. I went straight to the police. Filed a report for forgery, unlawful eviction, and theft. They said it would take time too. Everything takes time when you're the one who's been screwed. So I waited. And while I waited, I did something Jace didn't expect. I gathered everything. I printed every text I ever had from him. Screenshots of him thanking me after the hospital. A photo of his brother in my back seat from the ER dash cam. Dates. Times. Witness statements from the nurse who saw me bring him in. I even got a copy of the 911 recording from a neighbor who had called about the commotion in the hallway that night. I put it all in a folder. Labeled it Jace, fraud, and theft. 2 weeks passed. I had to crash on couches, borrow clothes, dig into savings. Meanwhile, Jace walked around like he owned the building. Then one morning, 2 squad cars pulled into the lot. I watched from the front seat of my friend's truck as they went upstairs. They knocked. He opened. And within 3 minutes, he was in cuffs. But that wasn't the part that broke him. The arrest was just the start. Jace was charged with forgery, criminal trespass, and theft. But it wasn't a slam dunk. His lawyer argued it was all a misunderstanding, said I gave him verbal permission to take over the lease, that I left the apartment willingly. Said I had a history of erratic behavior, which was news to me. That's when I realized how far Jace had gone. He hadn't just faked my signature. He'd started laying the groundwork to erase me. Emails to the landlord pretending to be me. Fake notices about moving out for personal reasons. He even changed my emergency contact info on the lease file. He wanted me gone, and he planned it. I found out later that Jace's brother was part of a larger problem. The OD wasn't a one-time thing. The apartment had been turned into a stash house. Cops found drug packaging materials in my bedroom closet, hidden under my blankets. My toothbrush was still in the holder when they walked in. If I hadn't gotten the landlord and police involved fast, it would have looked like I was part of it. But here's where it got worse. One of the cops recognized Jace's brother. Knew him from another bust across town. And that case had been tied to an overdose death. Suddenly, the investigation shifted. They weren't just looking at fraud anymore. They were pulling phone records, texts, location data, and my name, my address was all over it. I had to sit through hours of questioning. Had to prove I wasn't part of it. I showed them timestamps, receipts, photos from my workplace. Everything. Eventually they cleared me. But I wasn't done. Because one night, maybe 3 weeks after Jace's arrest, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer. But I did. It was his brother. "You did this," he said. "You think this is over?" He hung up. That's when I decided to finish what I started. After that call, I started watching my back. I changed my number, added cameras to my friend's place where I was still staying, and started locking everything, even inside the house. I didn't know how serious Jace's brother was, but something about the way he said it stuck with me. It wasn't just anger. It was a warning. I went back to the police, told them about the call. They logged it, said they'd keep an eye on it. But nothing came of it. No arrest, no follow-up. Just another note in a file somewhere. So I kept going. I dug into every detail I could about Jace and his brother. Turns out they weren't even from here originally. They'd been bouncing around from state to state. Arizona, then Georgia, then North Carolina. Always in cheap rentals. Always staying just long enough to wear out their welcome. One neighbor in Georgia actually posted in a forum warning people about them. Same pattern every time. Move in, charm the landlord, claim they were helping someone get clean, then the quiet weirdness would start. Small thefts. Noise complaints. And always someone overdosing. I sent all this to the landlord, along with court records I found online. He was floored. Said if he'd known even half of this, he never would have let Jace move in. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about my apartment. My stuff. Most of it had been taken by police as evidence or contaminated. They wouldn't even let me back in. I had to fill out forms just to try to reclaim some of it, and even then most things were lost. My bed. My couch. The only photos I had of my dad. Gone. So I started building a file, not for the police this time. For a civil suit. I wasn't rich. I wasn't even comfortable anymore. But I had time. I had the truth. And I had motive. What Jace didn't know was that the minute he faked that lease, the moment he called the landlord and said I was moving out early, he'd opened the door to something he couldn't undo. Because impersonating someone in a lease transfer? That's fraud. Signing their name? That's forgery. And lying to the cops about it after? That's obstruction. And when I finally served him the lawsuit while he sat in that county jail, still waiting for trial, he wasn't ready for that either. I never got my apartment back. Never got my things. No one paid me for the time I lost or the nights I didn't sleep or the way I still check locks twice. The court stuff is still dragging on. But sometimes I think about that night in the hallway. How I helped him without asking for anything. And I wonder what kind of person sees a hand reaching out and decides to break it